The time has come to experience terror at Collinwood, and I am very excited to bring you my very special guests today, Dana Gould and Kandice Martellaro. This is going to be a lot of fun, but before we get to our show, I have some news bites for you. As of this recording, there is just about 1 week left to vote in the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards, and Terror at Collinwood has once again been nominated for Best Podcast. Could this be the year? Well, that's up to you, because anyone can vote in the Rondo Awards. It's like the People's Choice Awards for classic horror. All you have to do is email your votes to taraco@aol.com. That's TARACO@AOL.com. Be sure to include your name in the email so that it's counted, and you can see the full ballot over at rondoaward.com. The deadline for voting is Sunday, April 20th at midnight, and it's 1 vote per person. Every email, as I said, must include your name to be counted, and all votes are kept strictly confidential. No emails or personal information will ever be shared with anyone. And no, you do not have to vote in every category. You can vote in one, all, or a few. Now, in addition to Terror at Collinwood bringing the Dark Shadows representation in the Best Podcast category, Ansel Farage's and Nathan Wilson's The Great Nick D, which features Dark Shadows cast members David Selby, Catherine Lee Scott, Lisa Richards, and Lara Parker in her final role, has been nominated for Best Independent/Streaming Film. And Mickey Gunter's interview with Dan Curtis expert Dr. Jeffrey Thompson from Wonder Number 18 has been nominated for Best Interview. Now, also in that category, Diana Robertson's interview with Penny Dreadful, hey, I think I know her, from Ghastly Phantasms number 19, has been nominated as well. And finally, Penny Dreadful was nominated for Favorite Horror Host, which I sincerely appreciate, and I'm honored to have won that award twice now. So I encourage you to vote for another horror host in that category. There are so many of those horror hosts listed there who are good friends, and they all deserve that award. Just make sure you get your votes in by April 20th. Now, on to other news. Holy cow, it looks like more guests have been added to the Lyndhurst Dark Shadows weekend, which is happening on Saturday, July 19th and Sunday, July 20th. In addition to Catherine Lee Scott, Sharon Smith Lentz, and Marie Wallace, Catherine has announced that Nancy Barrett will be attending, Donna McKechnie will be attending, and possibly even David Hennessy will be attending. Well, this is shaping up to be quite a can't-miss happening. The weekend will include meet-and-greet sessions on Saturday and Sunday, both in the morning and in the afternoon. The cost for the meet-and-greet is $40. There will also be other events taking place throughout the weekend, so check out the Lyndhurst site for more information. The link is in the show notes. And finally, advanced copies of the official Dark Shadows paper doll book have arrived at Hermes Press. This full-color book features 96 pages with 48 pages of art printed on thick cardstock. Hermes expects this title to arrive in May, and they will begin shipping pre-orders once they arrive in the order that they were received. Illustrated by Samantha Lomusio, the Dark Shadows paper doll book showcases 33 characters from the show as paper dolls. All of them appear in the modern timeline at Collinwood, alive or undead. In addition to the characters, there are over 120 costumes and props, including costumes from each flashback for the time-traveling characters, such as 1795, 1840, and 1897. Use the code SPRING2025 for 25% off your order, good through April 20th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. The link to the pre-order page is in the show notes. And with all that said, let's get to the show. There's nowhere to run, there's no place to hide. This podcast is fun, but there are spoilers inside. Welcome to the strange and unsettling world of terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, your hostess, Penny Dreadful, taking on the form of my despicable and dreaded doppelganger, Danielle. Welcome to the show. I am so excited to welcome my two guests. I'm beyond excited. I am ecstatic even to welcome my two guests, Dana Gould and Kandice Martellaro. Dana Gould is an Emmy Award-winning stand-up comedian, actor, writer, and voice artist who's been featured on HBO, Showtime, and Comedy Central. Among many other things, he wrote for The Simpsons for 7 years and served as co-executive producer on seasons 14 through 18. He wrote and performed on The Ben Stiller Show and has appeared in such TV shows as Seinfeld, Mad TV, and The King of Queens, and in films such as Mystery Men, where he played Squeegee Man, Tales of Halloween, Dumb and Dumber When Harry Met Lloyd, and was Gex in the Gex series of video games. In 2016, Dana created the IFC comedy horror series Stand Against Evil, where he also appeared as the character Kevin, a quirky gravedigger. Of course, everyone's gone bananas for Hanging with Dr. Z, the show where a character who looks remarkably like Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes interviews famous guests, and he's the host of the Dana Gould Hour podcast. Kandice Martellaro is a television writer, comedian, and associate programming manager. She has written for the horror comedy television series Stand Against Evil on IFC and Hulu. She also has a vast background in sketch comedy, having written for the CBS Diversity Showcase in 2016. Kandice has been an active member of the sketch comedy group Fembot PhD, in which she wrote, directed, and produced various short video sketches along with the other members of the group. In addition to her writing career, Kandice wrote, directed, and produced her own short films, including X-Napped and Don't Bring It In. Her producing credits include the documentary/stand-up comedy special Joyride, centered around lives and relationships of comedians Dana Gould and Bobcat Goldthwait, and the online comedy series Hanging with Dr. Z. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hello.
Hi. What a pleasure to have you both here. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're both busy. That was just the tip of the iceberg, what I read there, but so many wonderful things that you've both done. And I want to give a special shout out to Kandice, to our mutual friend, Chad Byers, aka Undead Johnny, for connecting us. Thanks, Chad, for doing that. Our listeners heard Chad in our Professor Stokes character analysis episode, and we had a great time there. And I look forward to having a great time with the two of you as well. So how are things? How are things going with you guys?
Good. No complaints here.
You were just battling with the leaf blower man, you told me.
Yes, and actually, no. The other big event of this morning is one of the crows in our parking lot is mad at me.
Uh-oh.
And I've been trying to make amends with the crow all morning. So that's been what's going on with
dog kibble. You need to get dog kibble.
Yeah, they do like it.
Yes, I read that.
Yeah, and right over time you can get them to eat out of your hand, and then they'll be your protector.
Yeah, and cat food.
Please tell me, Dana, why do you know that?
I watched a video about it the other day. I love crows. They're my favorite bird. And
me too. Yeah.
And I was watching this. They're so smart.
Yeah.
And we have a bunch. We have a bunch up where we live.
Yeah, they figured out. They did like this test where they put something in water that floats, but it was at the bottom of a cup floating, some food for the crow. And then they had a pile of rocks, and the crow figured out that if it just kept dropping rocks into the water level would rise, and the food bit or whatever it was would rise, and they got the food. Super smart birds.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well,
cool.
That's better than what I've been doing. I know they like shiny things, so I folded up a bunch of tinfoil, and I've been going out and offering it tinfoil.
Make a peace offering to the crows.
Why is the crow mad at you?
I have no idea. And I'm realizing I may have misinterpreted this behavior, but yesterday I was walking to a neighbor and it swooped down right next to my face and like cawed at me, but like in my face.
Wow.
So I interpreted that as mad, but I think it actually might not have been mad, but
maybe it's just saying, hey, what's up?
Yeah, but I like panicked and like ducked and flinched, and then it was mad.
Yeah, sure.
So I am so happy to have you both here. And my first exposure
I think I knew of you before that, but I think the first comedy bit I heard from you, Dana, was a friend of mine, Jetto Berry, who's also been on the podcast. He's also a Dark Shadows fan. He sent me, I think it was back in 2006, he sent me a clip of your stand-up. I think it was called "In Praise of Vincent Price," and I
Oh,
remember
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I said, "Wow, he does a dead-on Vincent Price impression." All due respect to Bill Hader, but I think you have the edge there in terms of Vincent
Oh,
Price.
Bill has been, it's funny, Bill, that's from an old album of mine, and Bill is very open about the fact that he's doing my impression of Vincent Price, which is fine because I'm doing my friend Tom's impression of Vincent Price.
Ah, okay.
That's how it works. I have a friend, his name is, he's a voiceover actor named Tom Sawyer, believe it or not. And he does a dead on bullseye Vincent Price. So I'm copying Tom. And then Bill is copying me, copying Tom.
Awesome. Someone else does a good one is Maurice LaMarche, who was the voice of the Brain.
Maurice is. Maurice is he's terrifyingly good.
Yeah, I'm sure. So Orson Welles is, for Brain, but I've heard him do Vincent Price too. Like, wow, that's really good too. But it's not one you hear a lot because you hear, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi,
sure,
kind of the go-tos. Vincent, that's pretty. Lon Chaney Jr. I'd love to hear a good Lon Chaney Jr. impression.
You'd have to get drunk.
So I want to ask you. So of course, I've watched Stand Against Evil a few years ago, and I loved it. And I've kept up with, some of your podcasts as well, Dana, and of course, through the Collinsport Historical Society, Wallace McBride. I heard you on his podcast talking about Dark Shadows and comparing the Collins family to the Kennedys, which I thought was a really fascinating comparison there. And you did a piece for Fangoria as well. And in Stand Against Evil, there were nods to many things, and Dark Shadows. I think the Vampire Creek episode had some Dark Shadows going on in there too.
Yeah, that was all Kandice. But I'll just to give you like a 30-second background. I come from Massachusetts, like you. I was a Dark Shadows kid. I lived next to a cemetery. We played in the cemetery. I mean, we played Dark Shadows. I was always Willie because I was the youngest, so I was the one that was sent out on errands. But it took me a long time. I started doing comedy in 1982, right out of high school. And it took me a little close to 10 years to figure out, but I was a horror movie kid. And it took me about 10 years to figure out that I could actually incorporate the stuff that I love into comedy, that I could talk about horror movie. Like it was just, they were very separate.
Yeah.
And I just had to develop enough as a writer, and it's definitely a niche thing, but that's I'm happy for it to be a niche thing. I do what I do. As I always like to say, the audience comes last. I'm here to do what I like. And Stand Against Evil was very much me making the show that I wanted to see. And the credits, right out of the gate, the credit font is Dan Curtis TV movies from 1972. It's the Night Stalker. It's the Night Stalker credit font, and also Columbo. That yellow, early 70s yellow. I forget the name of the font. And Kandice was a writer and a producer on the show. And the premise of the show was that there were these 72 demons that they had to extinguish. And that was just the reason it was 72 demons, or however many it was. It was
172.
172? Okay.
Yes.
I was thinking of 72 virgins if I'm a Muslim terrorist. And I'm always conflating the two. But that was suggested to me by Pete Aronson, who ran IFC at the time. It was a great idea. People always complain about notes. Notes can be great. Notes can be very helpful if they're smart. And Pete is a writer as well, and he's very smart. And that gave the show a structure. That gave the show a finishing point and an arc. But because there were demons, vampires didn't really figure into it, because it just seemed to be a different flavor of it wasn't Dark Shadows. It was this more supernatural witchcraft thing. And I wasn't against doing a vampire story, but it didn't feel intrinsic to the particular type of supernatural horror that we were using. And Kandice came up with the idea, and then I'll shut up, of what if the character got sucked into at the time it was Vampire Diaries. It's like, what if a character got sucked into a vampire TV show? And that to me was like, oh, that was great. That was like, that was that and then we just she went to town on it. It was great.
Yeah. So was when you wrote this, Kandice, this episode, so you had Vampire Diaries in mind initially as the show?
Well, actually, the whole evolution of how this episode even happened, it actually started out as a Coraline episode.
Oh,
we
interesting.
were going to it was going to be that, because Coraline's like my whole personality. So it was going to be an episode where it's like the daughter character, Denise, finds a portal into this secret world and has her own like Coraline experience. But as we started developing it further, it just wasn't working. It didn't feel right for the show. So at the time, Dana's daughters were really into Vampire Diaries. That was a big thing in the household. So and so we talked about it, and I was into that as well. And so we decided, let's go that route and make it a Vampire Diaries parody. And then Dana, with his background of Dark Shadows, we kind of married the two.
Yeah.
And so it's meant just to be like a vampire soap opera parody. So it's Denise gets sucked into her favorite TV show, Vampire Creek. So like Vampire Diaries meets Dawson's Creek.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then she gets sucked into that world. And then they have to fight, instead of demons, they're fighting vampires that episode. But it was in this very Vampire Diaries / Dark Shadows kind of hybrid.
The big Dark Shadows call out to me was Evie becomes a vampire and looks exactly like Carolyn in House of Dark Shadows with the white gown and everything and the long blonde hair. I was like, oh, that was
not an accident.
No, I sent this to Dana yesterday, and I almost sent it to you as well. I dug through and I found the original email, the exchange that we had with the wardrobe department. Dana actually sent a photo of Carolyn from the show, and he was like, Evie should look like this from the moment she leaves the coffin and becomes a vampire for the rest of the episode. She should look exactly like this. Yeah, and I sent Dana like a side by side of the photo he sent. They nailed it. Like, it was exactly what.
Yeah. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, Carol, Vampire Carol in House of Dark Shadows nod. Nice.
Yeah, there's the photo of Carolyn that I sent.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then that was
Evie.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. That's
great.
Great.
No, she nailed it. They did a great job. They did a great job.
Yeah, they did a great job. Janet did a great job.
That's great. Yeah. And you did other nods too, like there was a Kolchak character in the X-Files. You did an X-Files themed episode. That was also, which I was showing Dana my little Kolchak coaster before the show that my friend Aaron
that was maybe my favorite moment on the show, was seeing that guy. And I'll send you the photos of him on the monitor, because Rob Cohen, who directed that episode, who directed most of the episodes, we've been partners for years. Rob directs Hanging with Dr. Z. Rob and Kandice are like my, creative partners. Yeah. And we were like holding each other, like, like seeing the guy looking like Kolchak. It just made me, and it was just, and the reaction online was, and it's sort of like, it's always been my approach to things, and I really got it from Joel Hodgson used to say about Mystery Science Theater. Not everybody will get it, but the right people will get it. Yeah. And that's like what I said is like, it's the more specific it can be, you do limit your numbers, like your mass numbers, but it's also, you increase being somebody's favorite thing.
Yes.
And you see like everybody, the minute we posted a photo on that, which is like Kolchak. It's like these, 1,000 people are going to lose their minds over this, and that's I'm happy to be the person that provides that feeling.
I love it.
And my character of Kevin started out as the original intention of Kevin, and I have to say, I failed completely. Was I wanted him to be Dwight Fry from the original Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
I never wanted him to talk. I just wanted him to be in the background all the time. Like wherever they were, I wanted this weird hunchback guy to walk through, whether they were in the cemetery or in a courthouse or in a diner. And that never worked. And then we found that narratively, we needed another person to kind of communicate information and stuff. And so, and then he ended up dating Denise. And then he morphed into Willie. He definitely, if you look at his, he has that flannel jacket. That's all House of Dark Shadows era Willie Loomis.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
He got cured of his hump.
Yeah.
It just kind of went away.
I love it.
Yeah. But I do, my only creative regret about the show was that I utterly failed with my idea for Kevin, which I thought would have been really funny.
I like what Kevin evolved to, though.
I do too.
It was good.
it.
Yeah.
He was sweet. I liked Kevin.
Kevin Cougar Mellencamp, no relation.
So I want to ask you. So both of you, you talked a little bit, Dana, about you were a Dark Shadows kid. Was this you must have been really young when the original show was on? So you were really little at that time, but you were.
I was very little. I was 4. Yeah, I was 4, 5, 6 years old. Yeah. But I have older brothers, and so it was a big thing.
So you guys would get together and watch it every day?
Yeah, I remember it being on television. I remember specifically watching Barnabas and Chris Jennings as the werewolf fighting in a mausoleum. I remember watching that specifically. And we had the board game. And even after the show went off the air, it was still a thing in our house. We had the board game. My mother was, my mother would just say, like, if we were up late, just like, go to bed. Who are you, Barnabas Collins? Like, it was just, and, I lived next to a cemetery in a small town in Massachusetts. Like it was, it's like if I was a Star Trek fan, it would be like I lived on the Enterprise. It's like, no, this is the show. Yeah. And there was a mausoleum in the cemetery where we would play that looked just like the old house. It had the columns, and we would go and play Dark Shadows. I mean, that was what we do.
And you said you were Willie in those games?
Yeah, because I was the youngest one, so I was the one that everybody was telling to go do something.
Yeah.
Willie, go over here. Willie, go over here.
And did that tie into your love of monsters and classic horror at that time as well? Like it all dovetailed. And then right after Dark Shadows, there was the Night Stalker and Planet of the Apes and Star Trek. I was all Famous Monsters magazine. Sure. I was that kid. There was a horror host was fantastic out of Massachusetts in the early 70s, Simon Sanctorum. Yep. Do you remember Simon?
I do, Simon Sanctorum, sure.
Yeah, I managed to find footage of his show. I found his widow. Sadly, Gary Newton, who played Simon, passed away, but I found his widow, and she still had like 3 3/4 inch tapes. Do
you have that footage digitized?
Yeah, we put it on YouTube. Yeah, I can send the link to.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Do you remember?
He's amazing. Feep. I didn't watch Feep, but I've heard the audio of Feep. The little.
Yeah,
did you see
my
Feep?
Brothers could. I know I was too young, but my brothers know. It's funny. I'd never heard of Feep, but when I was, as a teenager, I was a little punk rock kid.
Same.
By the way, Clem Burke, R.I.P., the drummer of Blondie, went to heaven last night.
I know.
But there was a club in Rhode Island, a punk club called Club Babyhead.
Club Babyhead. I used to go to Babyhead. Yeah,
okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
The T-shirt for Club Babyhead looked just like Feep.
Oh.
And I didn't know that until my brother said, "What is that, Feep?" And I went, what's Feep? And then I found out all about Feep.
Yeah, Feep was voiced by Ed McDonald. Was like a Boston TV legend. He was Major Mudd, and he did a lot
That was Major Mudd.
Yes, yeah,
I didn't know that was. Oh,
that was him.
I have to email my brother now.
Yeah, and then he was the voice of Feep, and he was, this little, for those who don't know, he's a little. I'll put his picture up for the video version, but he's a little looks like a little light bulb headed guy, alien.
But Major Mudd was not Rex Trailer. They were not the same person, right?
I don't think so. I know Ed was.
My brother was on Rex Trailer once.
Oh, no kidding! Wow,
he was in Boomtown. Cool.
That's so cool.
Poor Kandice is left out.
I was about to turn my attention to Kandice because I want to hear your story. So I know you are a big fan of. Chad told me you're a big fan of classic horror films in general. So did you know Dark Shadows at all, or what was your
Feep?
Feep, there he is. Yep.
That's amazing.
That is Feep.
Yes, amazing.
And Simon looks he's like a cross between Edgar Allan Poe and like Alice Cooper, maybe. He has a mustache and was like kind of dirty, nasty teeth and wore like this kind of 18th century outfit and was very kind of sarcastic and nasty to the audience. Like he would insult the viewers who were forced to watch his show. He was amazing. Anyway, Kandice, tell us, what was it? So how did you get into horror? And did Dark Shadows figure in at all in that?
This is probably blasphemous to say on this podcast, and I was debating if I was going to admit it. I'm actually I'm familiar with Dark Shadows because of Dana.
Oh, okay.
But like prior to Dana, I was not familiar with it.
This podcast is over. Click.
Yeah, you're out. You're kicked out. I know. I was almost like, should I even go on? I'm a fraud.
No, not at all. Because now you will be inspired to go watch Dark Shadows.
Honestly, I mean, my boyfriend and I put it on yesterday. So I mean, I've seen some, but like, I'm not an expert by any means. But it's funny because of working with Dana, though, it works its way into like everything I do. Dana graciously let me use his house for a short horror film that I made. And Dana has a Barnabas Collins throw pillow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about it. We were just shooting in this one thing, but the pillow is so prominent. It looks like I must be like the most diehard Dark Shadows fan ever that I like made sure this was in a shot, and it's not. It just like happened to be how it went. So that's how I came into. But horror in general, I went to film school, and they didn't really have, weirdly enough, at that time, any classes in horror. And I would have, if they had it, I would have eaten that up entirely. But it was coming out of college. I was going through this ugly, awful breakup, and I was living with my dad, and my dad was tired of me like moping around. And so he was like, okay, it was October, and he was like, every night we're going to watch a different iconic slasher movie, which just seeped into horror in general. Mm-hmm. And that's really where like my love, like I just became like a diehard horror fanatic off of that. So that's where it originated.
So it was from your dad. He got you into with me. Yeah. It was my uncle. I've always talked about this. My uncle Valdemar, who came over from Portugal when he was a kid, and he got into all the classic horror stuff and Dark Shadows, but also like Hammer and Universal and Famous Monsters of Filmland. And he would give me all that stuff when I was little. And I think initially he was trying to scare me with that stuff, but I was like fascinated by it. I wanted more.
And with me, it was my mom. She would let me watch. She loved the old Universals, and we would stay up on Saturday nights and watch Simon's Sanctorum on channels. I believe it was Channel 7.
Yeah, I think so. Was it 5 or 7? I don't remember, but yeah, that's
5 or 7. And then they lost that syndication package of movies. Channel 56, but Kaiser Broadcasting bought it, and then you had Creature Feature, which became Creature Double Feature.
Yes, yeah, definitely an iconic show. If you grew up in the Boston area during especially 70s and 80s, Creature Double Feature, that's what you were doing on Saturday afternoon.
That's what you're doing on Saturday afternoon. That's right. That's really true.
It's true. Like, it's so nice outside, but King Kong versus Godzilla's on. I have to watch it.
It's so funny that you said that. One of the things that I have to do today, my friend Tom Shabilla, who wrote this book.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
His next book is about the making of King Kong versus Godzilla.
No kidding.
And I have to write the foreword to that today.
Wow.
Because it's actually it's the most perfectly Hollywood story you've ever seen, because it was a whole bunch of people who thought they had the rights to the character, and none of them did.
Right.
The only person that made money was the guy that knew he never had the rights and went ahead anyway.
That's amazing. That's
it was
amazing.
the guy that had the courage to rob the bank.
That's incredible. I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that would be
didn't
cool.
know
I'll keep
that.
an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's the most Hollywood story. It's
Yeah.
like everybody got screwed over. And the only guy that won was the guy without morals.
Yeah. Amazing. No, what was the other book? It was James Bond and spy films of
And the 60s spy craze.
60 spy craze. Yeah.
Yeah, and he also wrote a book called 1966, television's first all-color season. How that season of television sort of defined what TV was until the advent of streaming.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because 1966 seems to be such a key year, not only for Dark Shadows, because Dark Shadows premiered in 1966, but you also got the premiere of Batman, the Adam West Batman, and Star Trek came out that year. The Monkees, like, it was just like such a great year for TV, where like all this cool, fun, creative stuff was coming out at that time, and influential, that influenced many subsequent things. And I think Dark Shadows is one of those. Like I mentioned, all those things I mentioned, is particularly Batman and Star Trek, are definitely still really permeate the pop culture consciousness in a big way. Dark Shadows is it's still there. Like it's kind of lurking in the shadows, I guess, appropriately enough. Like Dark Shadows hasn't gone away, but I feel like, I mean, Dark Shadows in the 60s and going into the early 70s was such a huge pop culture phenomenon, to the point where they ended up making, 2 MGM feature films based on the show. There were huge like parades where Jonathan Frid would come. Hi, cute dog shows up in the what's your dog's name, Dana?
Oh, that's Bear. She was whining because I have a little scat mat on that chair because one of the cats thought it was a litter box once. So she comes in and tells me when she wants to sit down. She goes,
"Hi, Bear."
Oh, sorry.
But I've it's had such an influence. Clearly, Dana, you've mentioned your love of Dark Shadows. I've had John Logan on the podcast a couple times.
Oh, wow.
He's such a wonderful guy and a good friend, and he's a really nice guy, and he loves Dark Shadows. In fact, Penny Dreadful, if you watch that series, is very Dark Shadows echoes in there. Yeah. Ryan Murphy, who created American Horror Story, calls it his Dark Shadows, because he had that repertory company of actors who played different.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Alan Ball cites Dark Shadows and talking about True Blood. His grandmother used to make him watch it to scare him. And Bill Compton is very much a Barnabas type character. Anne Rice, all these creators that cite Dark Shadows, and yet it seems I've heard it called the missing link of pop culture, because if you think about the impact or influence that Barnabas in particular, but just the show in general, has had on like genre television and films and depictions of vampires, etc., it kills me that it doesn't get the recognition it deserves. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, here's the crazy obvious one to me, and I'll let Kandice give her opinion. When Francis Ford Coppola made Bram Stoker's Dracula, the whole selling point of this movie was, this isn't like the movie, this is the book. Mm-hmm. This is the book Dracula by Bram Stoker. And the whole premise of the movie was that Mina was the reincarnation of Barnabas that Mina was the reincarnation of Dracula's dead wife, and he yearned for her, and it was a love story. And that's not the book. That's Dark Shadows.
Yep.
That's Barnabas and Josette. That is not in Bram Stoker's book at all.
Yep.
It's completely Dan Curtis, which I always thought was just like, and no one just like, just give the guy credit.
Exactly. And he sued, I think he sued Francis Ford Coppola. I don't know what the result of that was, but I
good for him, as well. He should have.
Yeah.
Yep. In the same way that the Terminator was Demon with a Glass Hand. the Outer Limits episode. And
Yeah.
Harlan Ellison sued and won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I know Dark Shadows, I mean, technically it's a soap opera, but not really. It's kind of its own weird thing. It is serialized, it aired during the day, but it had the content of the show was so different and distinct. And I wonder if that's maybe what hurt us. I've talked to, especially horror fans, like, that's that soap opera. I don't want to watch that. It's a soap opera. I'm like, no, it's different from like Days of Our Lives or something. It's its own unique thing. I don't know if it's that, but
well, what I think, and Kandice will be able to speak to this, because we both have recently, I think because of the sad passing of David Lynch, we both did Twin Peaks rewatches.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I like that show a lot.
I was going to say, I clocked your mug that you were drinking out of earlier.
And, but I had the sheriff's department, the mug from the sheriff's department.
Oh, awesome. Oh, my friend
That's
Rebecca's
just-
a huge Twin Peaks fan. And
That's just on display.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was in the mug when I
Nice. Oh, I love it.
But the thing is, because that both shows, they were anti-television. Like Dark Shadows was almost an anti-soap opera in the sense that it subverted the genres of a soap opera so completely by having all of these supernatural stories. And Twin Peaks subverted all of the elements of a nighttime soap opera, of an hour-long night. I mean, it was basically the anti-Peyton Place. But I also think you limit your lifespan by doing that. There's only so many times. It's like a punk album. You can only tear down rock and roll so many times.
Right.
And you just end up making the same album over and over and over and over again. Then you have to grow and change, and then it becomes something else. So what Dark Shadows never did, which is what the third season of Twin Peaks did in 2017, was it blew out of its own world and went out into the world. And that was the only place that show could have gone. And that would have been an interesting way for Dark Shadows to have extended its life, because as they said, there's only, they basically they did Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They did every ghost story, whatever it was. And all right, we'll play Frankenstein in Collinwood. We'll play Dracula in Collinwood. We'll play the Wolfman in Collinwood. We'll play Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde at Collinwood. And eventually you run out of stuff.
They didn't do the Mummy.
They didn't do the Mummy. They could have done the Mummy. They could have done a lot. And I think the only way it could have transcended that was if it had sort of blown out of its own world. I don't know how they would have done that, but it's to use another 60s musical analogy, you can be the Beatles for so long and then you have to make Sgt. Pepper or you're done.
Right.
You have to completely explode what you do and do something beyond it.
That's a good point. It's just, when I went to Comic-Con in 2016, I've mentioned this before, it's like, it was the anniversary of all of those shows, but, Batman 66 was everywhere, Star Trek was everywhere. It was like, where's Dark Shadows? But of course, I had a guest on the podcast who pointed out, Batman and Star Trek have huge corporations behind them. Dark Shadows has Dan Curtis's daughters.
Right,
Dark Shadows,
and huge movie franchise.
Right. Candice, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, Dana, I don't know if you even remember this or know what I'm talking about, but it's interesting that you're saying that, because that is kind of what you were intending to do had Stan gotten a fourth season.
Yeah.
Is you were going to do like a pretty hard left into something very different, just for the reason you're describing. And we never got to see it.
Never got to see it.
Yeah.
But I will say that the show they replaced us with destroyed the network.
So at least there's that. But
At least there's that.
What were you thinking of? Can you talk about what you were planning to do for that season?
Yeah, we wanted to bring in a character that was a little like Slender Man. And play a lot of the show not on our plane of reality. And to use the Twin Peaks analogy, we were going to do most of the show from the Black Lodge.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And like even just certain characters were going to have like the way they grew between when the third season ended and the fourth season started. They were going to be pretty drastically.
Yeah, we were gonna do
Yeah.
a jump. We were gonna do a jump.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But continue.
Because you have to keep you have to keep doing that. People talk about, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I rewatched it and I'm doing a thing on my podcast about it. The dreaded second season of Twin Peaks where they really lost the plot. And then they got it back at the very end because, Laura Palmer was the soul of the show. And so when you solve that, you're not doing a show about anything. The only other character that meant as much was Dale Cooper. So when they got Dale Cooper's evil, had they followed that immediately, I think the show would have had a chance. But then you would have to have done what they did in season 3. Then you got to go. I mean, the brilliant thing about season 3 was the first shot is of New York City. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, we're going to go to Twin Peaks, but we're also going all over the world.
Yeah. Just something totally different.
And it was this Lovecraftian thing. And that's what you have to do. And also you have specifically with American television, although that has changed. Mm-hmm. It was always like, well, here's this idea for the show. Well, how does it run forever?
Yeah.
Some shows don't run forever. Some shows have a lifespan. They 3 seasons or 4 seasons or 5 seasons, and then they're kind of done. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly.
The genius of Doctor Who is it changes every 3 years because you bring in a new lead character.
Right. Yeah. And there are a lot of similarities between, especially classic Doctor Who and Dark Shadows. Like you look at it, it's not really a far cry from Dark Shadows at all. But you mentioned shows that keep on going. The Simpsons, which of course you were heavily involved in The Simpsons. Yeah. And they did the Treehouse of Horror every year. Was there ever a Dark Shadows reference in there? Or did you ever try to put one? Did you ever try to put one?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course I tried. But you always get the...
Well, see, that's that reaction. That's the thing that always irks me. I'm like, we got to get rid of that reaction.
I wanted to do an episode. This is the episode that I banged on this like a gypsy with a tambourine. I could not get them to do this. Was Lisa Becomes Goth.
That's great.
Lisa becomes goth. Then all the goth kids come over the house. They meet Bart. And then they all worship Bart and they change. And then Lisa's the only goth because they all want to be Bart. Yeah, no, I thought it was just like it writes itself. And they never, I don't know.
That's too bad. That's
because there wasn't I'll tell you why off the show.
Okay.
But I don't want to tell you why while I'm being recorded.
Okay.
But, well, no, actually, I will tell you why, and it's kind of a sad story. It was not long after Columbine, and there was a mistaken belief that those kids were goth because it said the trench coat mafia, which was a complete fabrication of the media's. It had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah,
but they didn't want that parallel.
I gotcha. Yeah, I remember that. And it was like they were associating goth and they were vilifying goth and much like in how they did with the, heavy metal was satanic back in the 80s.
Or the Central Park 5. The same thing. Just like,
exactly.
All these kids.
Yeah. But that would have been cool though. That's a great idea. One thing you mentioned, with Twin Peaks coming back and David Lynch and continuing it. That's one thing when they've tried to redo Dark Shadow, bring back Dark Shadows, they've tried to remake it. Like, Dan Curtis in 91 did the not short-lived 91 series, which I thought was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. But it was very short-lived. They tried to do a pilot in 2004 for the WB, and that didn't even get aired. And then,
I'm assuming you've seen it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. It has they brought in a director on that who was not familiar with Dark Shadows at all, so he did not want to get rid of the cane. It's stupid. He didn't want to, it's I don't think he really got it. He was doing some Dario Argento kind of lighting, which I thought was kind of interesting, but it was all right. And then the other film in 2012, the Tim Burton and Johnny Depp movie, the comedy version of it. Yeah. So it was like but they always kind of, it's like a remake of it. They never did.
I will say that Tim Burton's Dark Shadows is every bit as good as Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes.
Oh no.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Yes.
It's like now destroy the Beatles and you'll have the 60s trifecta.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like
Get Johnny Depp in a hat with a kazoo, call it the Beatles, and you'll have destroyed 3 giant pillars of 60s pop culture.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the
Nailed it.
interesting thing about both of those films, and by the way, he also made my favorite movie of all time, which is Ed Wood. It's like
I love Ed Wood.
You
I love it.
you nailed this, and then you went in the complete opposite direction. But both of those movies are perfectly wrong. Like there's not one thing is right.
Yeah.
It's all completely wrong. I have friends that are friends of Tim Burton, like personal friends of Tim Burton that have worked with him, that have written and worked with him, and they saw Dark Shadows before I did. And I said, "So how is it?" And my friend said, "It seems to be a movie about canning."
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah.
Right the canneries. Yes.
Yeah. No, I still think that there was a way that we're going to bring it back again recently.
Yes. Yep.
And
Mark
it was
B.
going to
Perry.
focus on a young woman.
Yes. Victoria
And
Winter's daughter.
It was good. Yeah. And Barnabas was like a tangential character, I think, or was going to come in later.
I think he was going to come in later. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all great. I mean, I definitely think that there's a world there that can be done. And I love the idea of shaking up the jigsaw puzzle and doing it a little differently.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know why it can't,
Well, that's
I
the
know why
thing.
they can't get it right.
It's not every one of these versions has been like an attempt to retell the story, and I like the idea of trying to do like what's happening at Collinwood now, and everything that happened in the original show happened, and things happened in the interim, so they could explore all kinds of and still make it gothic and spooky and stuff, but do some really fun stuff with that. And I don't know what the current status of any Dark Shadows continuation is.
Yeah.
I do know that there is interest in continuing to bring it back and pitch
It
it.
is. I mean, it's IP, and there's a world there to be explored. I mean, it's one interesting thing that they could do is, again, I hate to keep making those, what they did in season 3 of Twin Peaks is, in the original Twin Peaks, it was in this sort of Lynchian neo-50s kind of world. Where like it was 1990, but those kids were really from like it was really from the late 50s.
Yeah.
And then in the third season, it's a little more modern. The kids are taking hard drugs, and it would like to see Collinwood would have a big meth problem, like Cape Cod. It would be.
Right.
And
Mrs. Johnson snuggling meth into Tom.
Yeah, and there would be a big problem, and you could tie that into a supernatural device. You could make that about it, but it would be interesting to play it in quasi reality. I think there's a lot to be done. It would be really interesting to see if you play it not for laughs.
Right.
If a vampire had a hard time drinking drugs if a vampire had a hard time drinking blood that was tainted with drugs, finding someone in the modern world that's not on some kind of drug would be really difficult.
Candice, what do you think of all this? Like, do you think it's worth? I know you haven't really watched much of the original Dark Shadows, but is it something that you think is more product of its time, or should stay kind of don't touch it? Or should it be?
I think if there were ever a time to go that path and have a version of it come out, it's now, because I think there's a market that really is craving that type of, I hate to use the word content, but
right.
I with like Wednesday on Netflix was huge, and I feel like this would be like adjacent, and there's a world where the fans of Wednesday would latch onto this so quick without even knowing anything about it.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, like, I love the movie. This isn't a vampire thing, but I still think there's some Dark Shadows influence on it. I love the movie Lisa Frankenstein.
I wanted to see that. I haven't seen it yet. Is it good?
I mean, I love it, but I do see a lot of like Dark Shadows influence even on that. which isn't even a vampire movie. But so I think there's like a very market that is craving that right now. And it's like, oh my God, if the right heads could get together and develop that, that would do so well.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with streaming now, Dark Shadows was serialized, and all of these streaming shows now are like serialized stories. I mean, they're pretty much soap operas. I mean, you can't just drop in and watch one episode of, say, what, Stranger
No.
Things or something. It's like there's like a cliffhanger, and then you got to watch the next one and the next one and the next one.
I'm actually going to call I have to talk to my agent today anyway. I'm actually going to call and see where it is, because they can find out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it would
there's
be
absolutely.
it would be interesting to see if anybody was, if Mark Perry had left the project, or, because it's just waiting for somebody to pick it up. It's just lying on, as we would say, it's lying on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just need to pick it up and do something with it.
And one other idea that was suggested, we kind of bantered back and forth with some other guests I had on the podcast, was the idea of a Dan Curtis shared universe, which would be kind of fun, because we did, I don't know if you know Mark DeWidziak, film critic.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes,
Mark's
I do,
awesome. Yeah, I've had Mark on the podcast, and of course he wrote a short story where he got the blessing from Dan Curtis to do a Kolchak meets Barnabas.
Barnabas Collins. Yeah, I read that. It's great. Where Barnabas is the vampire that turned Yano scores at.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. It's just such a cool idea. Great. And then it's like, well, you might be able to tie in like Burnt Offerings and Trilogy of Terror and Dead of Night, and you could kind of almost.
Kolchak fighting the Zuni fetish doll would be fantastic.
I would pay good money to see that. But
there was a for a while they were going to do. Edgar Wright was going to do a remake of The Night Stalker, starring as Karl Kolchak. What do you know, Johnny Depp? And it was going to take place in 1972 in Las Vegas, and they had a really good twist, which was that basically the vampire was Howard Hughes, like he was this millionaire that ran Vegas. But I don't
interesting.
know. I think casting Kolchak is the hard part.
That's hard. Darren McGavin is, it's like Jonathan Frid too. It's like identified with that character. It's hard to imagine anybody else playing that role, but definitely Johnny Depp does not seem right for Kolchak to me.
No.
And for Barnabas, like I almost see him more as a Quentin than a Barnabas, honestly. But that movie, the Tim Burton movie, the thing that killed me was like Tim Burton and Johnny Depp were saying for years that they were huge fans of the show, and they watched it when they were kids and ran home from school to watch it. And Depp always wanted to play Barnabas. Michelle Pfeiffer is a huge fan too. And then they did it as a comedy. And I have a friend who had lunch with Tim Burton, and there was some talk about the Dark Shadows movie, and Burton said that he originally wanted to do it more like Sleepy Hollow, and which I think would have been more appropriate in tone.
I read that script. That was by,
the John August one.
Yeah, I know John, and I read that script.
Yeah, I've read it too. I did a 2-part.
That went up to the Leviathans.
Yes, isn't that wild? Yeah. He worked in the Leviathans and the Stairway Through Time and all kinds of stuff. But at least it wasn't a comedy. It had it was more. There was comedic moments in it, but it wasn't a comedy. And I think the studio, Warner Brothers, was pushing more for comedy, and Tim Burton eventually got on board with that idea, and they decided, comedy is the way to go. But it's like, why would you? Why? Cool. Well, do you guys have anything you want to add in terms of what you have coming up in the future? Is Hanging with Dr. Z, is the next season in the works, or?
Well, what we're doing is there's a lot of stuff in the Z universe. We segued into I do live shows quarterly at this place in LA called the Dynasty Typewriter, and they are available to stream. We're doing another one next Sunday, April 13th, and you can stream it live at dynastytypewriter.com. And we're doing a short film, and we're getting ready to take it out to see if somebody would actually give us money to do it, because it's self-funded right now. And I just got tired of asking people for money. So I was like, I feel bad. So, but no, he's very much alive. We're doing a short film. We're trying to get it sold as a show. His Instagram, Hanging with Dr. Z, is full of his stories of his career. And we do these live shows.
And some of those live shows are on the road too. So
Oh, cool.
keep an eye out for that if you're a fan. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll be in Austin, Texas. I have April 13th, he's at Dynasty Typewriter in Los Angeles. April 18th, he's at the Hideout in Austin, Texas. And it was so funny. We're Kandice and I are setting up that show right now. And the producers were like, well, there's really no dressing room in the venue, so you can get in the makeup in the hotel and then go over to the venue from there. And I'm like, no, I can't.
Yes.
I'm not going to walk around Texas in an ape mask.
Yeah. They were
wise, yeah.
I had to set like a pretty firm, like even a bathroom will do. Anything. He's not coming like that. Yeah.
You were on Svengoolie as Dr. Z, right?
Yes, yeah.
Rich is awesome. He's a great guy.
I just saw him Sunday. I was in Chicago.
Awesome. Sunday, if you see him, tell him I said hi. I haven't met him in person, but we've corresponded quite a bit.
He's the love. The great thing, and Kandice can speak to this as well. We have a lot of friends in sort of, we call it the horror community, and then I have a lot of friends in traditional show business, and executives and agents and lawyers and financial advisors and all of that stuff. All of the financial advisors and agents and lawyers and think that the people in the horror community are dark and weird and spooky. And it's like, no, you guys are.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
These guys are the nicest people on earth.
Yes.
Because they channel it into socially acceptable ways. You guys have it all suppressed and are just like waking up every morning, finding out a way to destroy somebody to make money. These people are just like, they're all the kindest, sweetest. Mick Garris is my neighbor.
Oh, he's great. Yeah.
I see Mick all the time. He's my neighbor.
Yeah.
And he's the single nicest human being I've ever met in my life. He's just like, it's just such a weird dichotomy.
Yeah.
Who was the other actor in Step Brothers with Will Ferrell? I'm blanking on his name.
John C. Reilly.
Oh, yeah.
He could play Kolchak.
Oh, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's definitely.
It's got to be a guy who would convincingly trip while being chased.
Totally. He has to be kind of rumpled the way.
Yeah.
Like he has
the
to
thing that
be able to
the
carry
thing
that
that Kolchak did that made me love him as a 10-year-old was that when he saw a monster, he'd go, which is like what a real person would do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know they wanted to bring him back. Well, he was in the X-Files as like Mulder's, mentor.
Yeah, as this guy that started the
X-Files. But they initially wanted to bring him in as Kolchak, as I recall, and he didn't want to do it at first. And I kind of wish I do wish they had done that.
I do too.
And then I heard he mended fences with Dan Curtis too, and that were talking about doing another Kolchak.
Yeah, they did.
I'll
tell you a great Darren McGavin story.
Mm-hmm.
Just to tell you again, like, what a great guy. I have a friend who was the original director of the film Happy Gilmore.
Okay, yeah.
In which Darren McGavin plays Adam Sandler's dad.
Mm-hmm.
A week before production, he got fired and replaced with another director because Adam didn't feel like the sense of humors were jibing. And this guy went on to have a great career. But at the time, he felt devastated. And he said, I'm sitting in my hotel room and I'm sitting on the bed packing up to go home. And I've been working on this thing for a year and it just got pulled out. I got paid, but and I'm just sitting there staring at the wall thinking, oh, my career's over. And there's a knock on my door and I open the door and there's Darren McGavin. And he says, welcome to show business.
Aw.
And he walked in and he goes and he talked to me for 2 hours, and I felt great after. And because I'll never forget that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad
so
you shared that
sweet.
story. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing that because you hear stories where you can have a temper sometimes and stuff, but
Yeah.
that's a
Well, yeah, the story, I'm sure you know the story about the last night of shooting on the Night Strangler.
yeah, that was what he got into. That was when he had it out with Dan
With
Curtis,
Dan.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just walked in because you got enough and walked home.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Well, Dan had a big temper too. I did a
Yeah.
whole episode on Dan Curtis fired Jonathan Frid. If you go, I don't. If
I don't know this story.
Oh, it was a whole to do. Well, it was kind of something that wasn't really some people knew but didn't really talk much about. But Mary O'Leary, who produced the Jonathan Frid documentary, had the documents. You know, that was what happened was after House of Dark Shadows.
Right. When Jonathan wouldn't go back for a night of.
Yes, he didn't want to do. He didn't like House of Dark Shadows, and he was supposed to be in the second movie. And when Dan Curtis called him into the office to talk about it in like December 1970, Jonathan said, I don't want to do the second movie. And there was a big blow up there. Dan Curtis said, well, if you don't want to play Barnabas in the movie, you're not going to play him in the show either. And he fired Jonathan, but Jonathan still had 3 months left on his contract before it was like I guess it was an option to renew or something like that.
Right.
So Jonathan's people responded. And we showed all the documentation on the podcast, and it wasn't anything salacious. We were just trying to kind of like figure out what happened here. And so the letters back said, well, Jonathan still has this amount of time left on his contract. So Dan Curtis said, well, if you don't, okay, then you're playing another character, and went to the writers and told them to create Bramwell for in parallel time, because the fans for years say, oh, Jonathan wanted to play another character, but it was really Dan told the writers, well, make another character for him because he's not playing Barnabas in the show. So then Dan went into a meeting with ABC. The ratings were down, but they were not terrible. They were like, basically ABC said, we'd rather cancel One Life to Live than Dark Shadows. But if you can bring the cost down on Dark Shadows, well, it was clear they wanted to cancel the other one versus this. They wanted, it was Brandon Stoddard, the head of daytime on ABC, to a meeting with Dan. And they came out of that meeting with Dark Shadows being canceled. And as we know, Dan Curtis wanted to go on and make movies. He was done, basically ready to move on from the show. And I suspect this all happened within a short period of time, like December, January, in that range of 1970 going into 1971. A lot of stuff was happening during that time. And I think that's the key reason why Dark Shadows ended, was really the whole thing with Jonathan and Dan, unfortunately.
Funny.
Yeah, if you go,
it's funny. It was a choice between One Life to Live or a guy who's undead.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yep. If you go, the episode is called "Why Dark Shadows Ended," and she Mary O'Leary, who was Jonathan Frid's business partner when he did the one-man shows on Clunes.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
she produced those, and so we showed some of the documentation and stuff. Kandice, you do sketch comedy, which I love sketch comedy. I went to Second City and Improv Boston, Improv Asylum. Are you doing any sketch stuff right now?
I actually kind of moved away from sketch. It's still in my bio.
Oh,
okay. But now I'm trying to get more into horror.
Nice.
I do stand up now. But
cool.
that's more of an avocation, like just for fun.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I was on a sketch team for several years called Fembot PhD.
Yeah.
And that was really great. I was very sad when it ended. But yeah, that was my background in sketch.
I love doing improv and sketch. The last time I did an improv class, sometimes I go back and I'll do a class, but everybody in the class was like way younger than I am. And one of the, I don't know if you know the game 5 Things. It's like, name 5 things you see in a grocery store. And my thing that came to my mind was, name 5 songs on your 80s mixtape. And the person could name 2 or 3 songs. I was like, come on. It's before my time. I said, well, I know songs from the 50s and stuff. That's before my time. But anyway, yeah. Stand up is tough. And I give you both credit. I tried stand up, and I did okay. I did Comedy Connection in East Providence, and some of the shows I did went well, but I had one really bad show in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and the crowd was not on board with what I was talking about. And there was this one guy, I made a mild, I don't do political humor, but I did take I should have been a worse dig, but I took a dig at Trump
Yeah.
but it was a mild dig. It was not even that bad. And the guy like was swearing at me.
Oh, sure.
Oh, he was furious that I would dare to say it. I was like, dude, chill out. Like, it wasn't even that bad,
I had a guy throw a beer at me in
What?
Portland, Oregon.
Really?
Conservative hotbed, Portland, Oregon.
What?
I love that
Wow.
there's Attleboro, Massachusetts, and Brattleboro, Vermont.
Yeah. So you're doing stand up right now, Candice. So people should keep an eye out for that. What else?
Where
should
can
we
they
keep-
see Don't Bring It In?
Yeah.
Don't bring it in right now. It did the festival circuit. Eventually, I will put up a link. Right now, it's just sort of tucked away.
Okay.
I am working on a feature version of Don't Bring It In that I hope will be something.
Okay.
So that's where I'm hoping for that to go. But in the meantime, I will eventually put up a link for Don't Bring It In. But if you wanted to see me or Dana doing stand-up, the place I do it most often is actually on a mutual friend of ours has a horror-themed stand-up show called Horror Nerd at the Hollywood
What?
Improv.
Oh my God, I
Yeah, it's
so want to
great.
go. I
Yeah.
really want. That sounds so groovy. I would be so into that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a really fun one. And it's like Dana was saying, like horror fans are the nicest people. So it's always just a fun room to be in.
It's
So,
so
yeah.
true. I mean, doing cons as Penny Dreadful, I don't do them as often now, but when they ask me to come, everybody is so nice. Everybody's so
Yeah.
friendly. They come to your table and they're just like so happy to talk to you about stuff that they love, and they're just friendly people. I've never had any negative experiences with that.
I actually wanted to ask you, you guys were talking about all the different horror shows you watched as kids.
Mhm.
Which, like, is that what inspired you to become a horror movie host?
For me,
You.
I mean, I grew up loving that stuff. Like, it was kind of always just like part of my DNA, and then just when I got into sketch and improv and stuff, I love comedy too. And it just seemed like a natural or perhaps supernatural trajectory to go in that direction. What inspired me, gave me the idea to do it was two things. There was a public access show out of Long Island, New York called Gula Gogo, which I love Gula Gogo because they're this retro kids dance show that's like black and white, and they would bring in 60s style garage bands to come and play, and the kids
so
would dance
cool.
and then show like industrial films. But it was hosted by a vampire, a hunchback, and the Invisible Man. It was hosted by horror hosts. Like, it was like such a weird juxtaposition, and through them I found out there were other like horror hosts actually showing like public domain films like White Zombie and The Brain That Couldn't Die and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. You can use public domain films, and you don't pay the rights for them. You just get copies of the films that you can, I have a friend who works for in the film department of a college, so she was able to access some of those films. And then the other thing that was happening it was like brewing, and at the time I was doing a production of Medea, the Greek tragedy. I was playing Medea, and was, of course, a vengeful sorceress who murders her own children to get revenge on her husband. The feel-good comedy of the year. And so playing this vengeful witch and joking around with the kids backstage. It was really dark material, but the kids, they were like, "Oh, are you going to kill us again tonight, Mom?" Yes, and it was terrible, dark humor backstage with the kids joking around. And it just struck me like, oh, Medea's a witch, and I'm in Massachusetts, and we've never had a witch-themed horror host in Massachusetts. So it was like kind of all of these things kind of came together at once, the Gula Gogo thing and the witch thing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I don't know. It was just kind of hit me at that point. And my late husband at that time, he was a old school punk rocker, grew in New York, but he also had kind of this vaudeville comedy kind of shtick that he would do.
Those go together. They really do.
It's true, right?
No, I'm not.
Absolutely.
You're right.
I know a lot of ex-punk rockers out here that became magicians.
That doesn't surprise me, actually. I can totally see it.
It's the horseshoe. It's like anti-show business becomes the ultimate show business thing. It's the completion of the circle. Yeah.
And he loved Harpo, great physical.
Sure.
Who doesn't? But he was like his hero. And so I was like, well, you want to be the werewolf, my sidekick in the show, but he's also my husband, but you don't talk, you just growl. And he came up with this crazy, like Scooby-Doo-esque kind of character. Everybody loved Guru. He was Guru. So when we would do appearances and stuff, he was like the Pied Piper. I mean, like everybody loved Guru. He was really funny. So yeah, we've just kind of started putting this together, and New England has that kind of spooky vibe anyway. So
Absolutely.
it developed like a little cult following, I guess, for a while. Won a couple of Rondo Awards and stuff with doing that. So it was fun. We had a good run. But after he passed away, I kind of wound it down. We still do specials once in a while, like for Halloween and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was such a big part of it that I felt weird doing it without him. It was kind of like a comedy duo kind of a thing. So he was the goofball and I was kind of the more dramatic one, and he'd always undercut me with his goofball antics.
Do you remember the Loup Garou from Johnny Quest?
Oh yeah.
That was just you. I haven't thought of it in 30 years, but when you said that, I remember my brothers running around the house going, "The Loup Garou, the Loup Garou."
I love it. Awesome. Yeah. Well, it was so great talking to both of you. What a pleasure it's been getting to chat with both of you. Thank you for taking the time today to chat with me and geek out a little bit.
So great! I'm going to check out some of those back episodes.
Oh yeah, and I'll send you the link to the Simon stuff because you definitely got to check that out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, please do. That would be great.
Awesome. Yes. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, which I would imagine you would with these two wonderful guests here, please give the podcast a rating on Apple Podcasts or give us a like on YouTube or a subscription. Certainly would appreciate it. And take care.
And for as long as they lived, the dark shadows never truly vanished, for there will always be terror at Collinwood. Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.